I'm Ken Brill, and I'm glad to be here. Over the years, when I started, we spent large amounts of money without really being able to justify it. It was really an emotional decision. And when I started the Uptime Institute, my objective was to gather hard data, benchmarking data on how did data centers fail, what parts of them fail, why do they fail, when do they fail, and most importantly, how can you prevent failure? So that when we make investments, when I started, the data center was $20 million, which at that time seemed like a lot of money. Today, that doesn't seem like very much. Data centers today can cost $500 million with no upward boundary. So I started the Institute basically to gather data on what decisions, what investments make sense. What I learned is that what was commonly assumed to be the source of failures in data centers was wrong. That people were focused on relatively high in the electrical system, when in fact the failures occurred very close to the load. And I invented something called dual power, which is now the standard way things are done, where the last point of redundancy is moved close to the load. We also discovered that people, not necessarily human error, people always go to human error when I say people, and I'm not saying that. The activity of people is the largest source of downtime in data centers. And when we look at that, most of that is caused by management actually allowing, permitting, not demanding, not providing tools, a whole bunch of things, allowing conditions which are known to cause downtime. So equipment is typically 20% of the failures. 50% of the failures are management failures, and the remaining is human error. Now, you can have downtime in a Tier 4 data center. That surprises people. Tier 4 says that you will not have equipment-caused downtime. But if people do the wrong things, you can still have downtime in a data center. So just to summarize all of this, I've been at this a long time. Started out in the troops and actually doing the work. And today I'm more concerned. I feel like I know how, and the industry generally knows how to make data centers more reliable, more robust. What I've discovered is what I call the economic breakdown of Moore's Law, where the cost of facilities is changing the economics of IT. And it's not a good change. So we're going to talk a little later about the 4 quadrants and whatnot, which is my way of trying to explain how we can make dramatic, like 50% improvements with not spending a whole lot of money. Many people want to know how did we come up with the tier system? And one of the most important things to realize is that the tier system was created by owners for owners. There are other competing systems. Some of them use the same terms that we do. Those systems have not gone through a rigorous process of owner evaluation. They are typically proposed by consultants or by vendors that have some level of self-interest in the outcome. Tier system, it came from United Parcel Service, which in the early 90s built the first Tier 4 data center. At the time we were doing it, we didn't know what we were doing. But we had a client that wanted to build a world-class facility. And it was only after we'd done it that we came up with, what do we call it? So the charge that we had from our client was he wanted to build a facility that would never limit IT. And what that meant to him was it would be evergreen in the sense that it could continuously be upgraded and maintained over a 30 to 50 year period without ever affecting the IT function. Well, we now call that today Tier 3 or concurrent maintainability. which means that you can maintain, replace, fix, add, change any part in this facility, the mechanical and electrical infrastructure, on a planned basis. Now, prior to this, what existed would be now called Tier 2 and Tier 1 facilities. And Tier 2 and Tier 1 Tier 1 and Tier 2 facilities require annual maintenance. So when you're doing your annual maintenance, it means that IT has to be shut down. So if you're in a global environment like United Parcel Service was then and is even more today, it's unacceptable to shut down the facility for maintenance. So that's what concurrent maintainability means. And many people think that they don't understand, why do you do maintenance? Well, you're either going to have facility equipment requires maintenance, just like your car. If you run your car without oil, the engine will seize up. If you run it without water, it will seize up. So there's certain maintenance that you have to do in your car. Same thing with the mechanical electrical system of the data center. So you can either do that maintenance on a planned basis, or you will have downtime on an unplanned basis, and usually it will be more catastrophic and more expensive. So Tier 3 means that you can do the maintenance that you need to do on a planned basis without affecting IT. Not only can you do the maintenance, but before you put the equipment that you maintain back in service, you can test it to validate that in the process of doing the maintenance, you haven't created a problem. One of the problems in taking your car sometimes to the mechanic is that you go in with 4 problems, and after you paid an expensive repair bill, you come out with 4 problems. They're just different problems. Same thing happens anytime you touch these things, that you can create unintended problems. So concurrent maintenance means you can do the work that you need to do and test it before you put it back in service. Now, United Parcel Service went one step beyond that, and they said they wanted to be able to have a worst case failure within the mechanical electrical system and still not have IT affected. Well, how can you have a worst case failure? Typically that's going to be a failure that's very close to the load. Most of your redundancy that you have in your mechanical electrical plant are really quite far from the IT load. So that goes back to the dual power system that I talked earlier about, and that you have to have if you want to have a high level of reliability, you have to have at least 2 sources of either cooling or electricity. So fault tolerance means that you can have a worst case failure and still have IT function. It also means that you can do concurrent maintenance. So that's the whole objective of this. Most people can't afford Tier 4. They don't have a business case that will justify it. Many people will have a business case that will justify Tier 3. Many people also will have a Tier 1 could be also a good logical decision for many people. It all goes back to what is the value of downtime. And if the value of downtime is not great, then don't spend a lot of money on fancy facilities.